Have you ever, like, needed to make a decision, any decision really, but you knew you had to look at the data first? So, you open up all those tabs, you've got the dashboards, the reports, all those spreadsheets, and then you just end up feeling completely overwhelmed, like even more lost than when you started. Anyone else?
Hmm. Well, that's exactly the feeling, this data drowning feeling, that made me want to look into this new service called Babbage. They're saying it's AI powered, like a data analyst, and they're making some really bold claims. We're going to try to unpack all that, dive deep into it, using a couple of articles by Karthik S. He writes the Art of Data Science Substack, so he knows his stuff.
It seems like what's really interesting about Babbage is that it's not just another dashboard. They're trying to actually mimic how a human analyst would work, like with a decision maker, but using AI to do both roles. Oh, totally. And Karthik, in one of his articles, it's called Babbage as a Service, he makes this comparison, it's really cool, about the way a data analyst and, say, a CEO would work together. Like the analyst digs into the data, looks for the trends, and then the CEO, based on that, starts asking questions, right? Forming hypotheses, which then guides what the analyst does next.
Makes sense, yeah.
So Babbage, get this, they're replicating that with two AI bots. One is naturally the analyst bot, which crunches all the numbers, but the other, this is really cool, it's CXO bot. It's supposed to be asking those smart, insightful questions, just like a, human executive would. It's all about emulating that back and forth, that spark of inquiry that leads to those aha moments.
And that's what's so clever about this whole setup. If they can pull it off, having AI for both the analysis and the questioning, Babbage could work way faster at a scale we can only dream of. I mean, think about it, testing thousands of hypotheses in the time it'd take us to go through just a handful.
Right, so it's not just about speed, though, right? It's about knowing the right questions to ask in the first place. But hold on, before we get carried away, let's talk about the problem Babbage is actually tackling here. This whole data deluge thing. Karthik has another article, Drowning in a Deluge of Data, and he uses these quotes from business leaders, and they are brutal. Like, one of them just straight up says, "Right now, there is way too much data being pushed to our managers, and they don't know how to make sense of it." I know, right? It's that feeling I was describing at the start that we've probably all felt at some point. He's got another quote that really hits home. "We track all these numbers regularly, yet we often find that we missed some signal, despite it being available in the data. They're drowning in information, but starving for real, actionable insights."
It's like that saying, can't see the forest for the trees, but with numbers.
Exactly. So how is Babbage supposed to be our life raft? Instead of those static dashboards, it seems like, from what Karthik describes, a much more dynamic, almost proactive way of looking at data. This is where it gets interesting. What if, instead of dashboards trying to answer every question, you have an AI that predicts what you'll ask based on the data itself?
So it's like having an AI analyst who already knows your business so well that they're anticipating your needs. That would be something else.
It would be, wouldn't it? Like having an AI analyst who knows your business so well that they're already 2 steps ahead, kind of anticipating your questions and then highlighting the most important insights.
Exactly. You cut through all the noise and get straight to the so what part. No more getting bogged down in irrelevant data, just the insights that really matter for making decisions.
I like that Karthik even uses this term, proactive data analysis, which I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds like a breath of fresh air, especially with all this dashboard overload we deal with.
Definitely.
But, and I know there's always a but, can AI actually pull this off? I mean, we're talking about trying to replicate human intuition here, right? Business smarts.
Right, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
AI's come a long way, but actually understanding the context, that's still a real challenge. For Babbage to work the way it's supposed to, it needs to be able to do more than just process the data. It needs to grasp those nuances of a specific business, like its goals, even its constraints.
So are we talking about AI limitations here then?
It's possible, yeah. Like imagine a company that's dealing with, let's say, sudden supply chain problems. A human analyst with experience would think about all sorts of things like real-time news, what's happening in the world, maybe even things like weather patterns, to really understand what's going on.
That's a lot.
It is. So the question is, can Babbage's algorithms actually keep up with that? Those unpredictable external kinds of factors.
Good point. It makes you wonder if, even if Babbage can handle the what of data analysis, will it ever get the why? That deeper level of, I don't know, interpretation, strategic thinking, maybe that still needs a human touch.
Exactly. And that actually makes Karthik's own business model pretty interesting, don't you think?
Yeah.
He's advocating for Babbage, obviously, but he also offers consulting services,
Interesting.
which I think suggests that even with AI as sophisticated as this, human expertise is still pretty important, at least for now.
Yeah, kind of like a safety net, right? We've got this amazing AI doing all the hard work, but you might still want a human brain in the loop to double check everything and offer some strategic direction.
Right, maybe that's the ideal scenario for these kinds of tools, at least for now. A collaboration between, say, AI efficiency and human insights. But it does make you wonder, though, what happens as AI like Babbage keeps evolving?
That's why I was thinking, are we headed towards a future where we have AI analysts presenting at board meetings, making recommendations based on data? Will we even need PowerPoint anymore?
Huh. Now, that would be something. But in all seriousness, it's definitely possible. But even if AI starts to take over more of that everyday analysis stuff, I still think things like human judgment and being able to think critically are going to be really important.
So always a need for humans. That's reassuring.
Definitely. We'd still be the ones interpreting the AI's findings, understanding where it might be limited, and ultimately making those judgment calls based on experience, intuition, and sometimes maybe even a bit of gut feeling.
So AI as a tool, a powerful one, but not necessarily a replacement for us.
Exactly. Augmentation, not elimination.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's get practical for a second. It's pretty clear that Babbage isn't going to be for everyone. So who would you say is the ideal customer for this kind of technology? Karthik actually describes a pretty specific profile in one of his articles, Drowning in a Deluge of Data. He lists four main characteristics: dealing with high volumes of data, having that data-driven culture, a strong desire for growth, and believing that they're not getting everything they could be out of their data right now.
Okay, yeah, I see what he's getting at. We're talking about companies that are practically swimming in data, always looking for an advantage, and who are really committed to using that data to make decisions. I mean, for them, a tool like Babbage could be huge. The potential return on their investment is enormous. Think about it. Having AI constantly analyzing your data, finding opportunities, basically guiding you toward smarter, faster decisions. That's a real advantage. It's like having a crystal ball, but instead of mystic energy, it's powered by algorithms and data points. Exactly. And while those four characteristics definitely scream big companies, I actually think that this kind of technology could also benefit organizations that, well, maybe they don't pick all those boxes right now.
Yeah, you're right. We always talk about the big companies, but even smaller ones, like maybe nonprofits, they have to deal with too much data these days too, right?
Totally. Think about, say, a nonprofit that's tracking how effective their programs are. They've probably got tons of data, like on donations, volunteer hours, the impact they're having on the community. But they probably don't have the resources for a whole team of data analysts.
So something like Babbage could really help them out, give them access to those insights without having to build a whole team from scratch, which could then help them do even better work.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so cool about this whole thing. It's not just about helping big businesses be more efficient.
Mm.
It could actually change things up, make data analysis something that everyone can use, not just the big guys.
That's a really good point, thinking about the bigger picture like that, the ripple effect. So it seems like we're at this turning point with data, we're drowning in it, but at the same time, we're starting to figure out how to deal with it, how to use it better.
Yeah, and I think Babbage, whether it's a huge success or just kind of paves the way for other things like it, it shows that things are changing. It's not just about collecting data anymore. We have to really think about how we analyze it,
Yeah.
how to get those useful insights out of it, and then actually use those to make better decisions.
It's about actually understanding the data, not just hoarding it, which I think is something we can all get behind. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the data deluge, well, there might be a Babbage coming along soon to help you navigate. But even more importantly, I think this is a good reminder to think about how you use data,
Yeah.
Are you using it effectively? Are you even asking the right questions? Are you really listening to what the data is telling you? Those are the questions that really matter, whether you're a CEO or a data scientist or just someone trying to make sense of it all.